of course, that are the comments, okay, the comments on Pesach. But it's not just that. The Torah wants that we should guard the matzahs for the sake of the eating matzah on Pesach. So it's not just, okay, it's not chametz. Why should we chametz? Why should we assume? We don't need to assume that it became chametz. Because according to the Torah, we don't have to just assume, well, maybe something happened to it. We could assume that everything is fine. But no, we have to actually guard, make sure that it does not become chametz, and it has to be done for the sake of eating matzah on Pesach. Now, we'll soon discuss more details about what does it mean has to be guarded, from what point you have to guard the matzah. But before that, what do you use for matzah? Meaning, we go to the store now, we find so many different breads made from buckwheat and rice and corn and all different types of, legumes they could find. You can make bread from many different types of bread. Could you make matzah out of could you make matzah out of rice, let's say? Or anything else, beans or other things that they make bread out of, and that's just matzah has to be made only from the 5 grains. From the 5 grains, which is wheat, barley, spelt, rye, oats. And usually it's from wheat. Some do it from spelt or oats because they have different issues, allergies or whatever. But generally, you cannot make matzah out of other ingredients because the matzah has to be something that has the ability to become chametz. The Torah says, don't eat chametz, eat matzah. I'm not saying the exact wording, just bringing the words that are relevant. The Torah says, you can't eat chametz, you're going to eat matzah. Oh, so we learn out that the matzah has to be from something that could become chametz, potentially could become chametz. If you're going to make anything else other than the 5 grains, cannot become chametz, will never become chametz. So therefore, we know that the matzah has to come from the 5 grains. Now, we'll talk later that for the Ashkenazim, they're not allowed to eat other things, like rice and millet, different legumes. We're not allowed to eat it. But that's besides the point. But going back to when the Torah says, Ushamartim et matzah. So Torah, the pasuk is, Ushamartim et matzah, you should guard the matzah. Ushamartim. That's the matzahs. The matzahs should be guarded. From what point does this have to be guarded? Halachically, in other words, what you can get away with is that from the time of the kneading. So according to halacha, if you take flour, now the flour these days is usually chametz because it's bleached. But let's say in those days it was not bleached, regular flour. According to the letter of the law, as they say, you can take flour, any flour. You don't have to be concerned that it's chametz, because according to halacha, you don't have to assume, oh, there's an issue, there's a problem over it. Maybe there's a problem. You don't have to assume such a thing. Who says, because maybe flour became chametz. Flour doesn't usually become chametz. So according to halacha, you can take any flour, unless you know there's an issue. And then from that point on, from when you start kneading the dough, where it's able to rise, you have to make sure it doesn't, you have to do it very quickly, and you have to do it for the sake of eating matzah on Pesach. But the better way is, and if you go to the store and you buy matzahs, you'll see on the box it says, Shmura Mishas Katsira. That's what it's going to say. It's going to say, Shmura. There's Shmura, it's guarded. Mishas, from the time of Katsira. Katsira means harvest. So there is an opinion that says that it has to be guarded from the time of Katsira, from the time of harvest, because that's when potentially it could become chametz, from when you harvest it. Because once it's not attached to the ground anymore, and you cut it, so now if it gets into contact with water, it could become chametz. So from this point on, being that it could become chametz, has to be guarded, and has to be guarded for the sake of eating matzah on Pesach. But it's even more than that, because even when it's still attached to the ground, it still has the ability to become chametz if it's already completely ripe. Once it ripens and it doesn't need to have any nurturing from the ground anymore because it's already ripe, now if it comes to the contact, if it rains, potentially it could become chametz. Potentially. Doesn't mean if it rains it will for sure become chametz, but it could become chametz. So therefore, from even when it's already attached to the ground, it's not severed, it didn't harvest it yet, there's still that potential where it could become chametz if it's already ripe. So that's why they have people, the mashgiach is already there, standing and watching and making sure that as soon as it ripens, they should harvest it right away. So achatchila, matzah on Pesach, especially the matzahs that were used by the Seder, are supposed to be shmura mishas ktsira, guarded from the time of harvest. So from the time of harvesting, where already it has potential to become chametz if it comes to contact with water, already it has to be guarded from not from becoming chametz. It has to be done for the sake of the mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach. And this has to be done by Jews. It can't be done by non-Jews because it has to be done for the sake of eating matzah on Pesach. So it's not just the issue of trusting them or not, but it has to be done for the sake of the mitzvah, and it has to be done by Jewish people. In terms of the ability of the dough becoming chametz, so let's discuss now in the matzah bakery. So now you have flour that is kosher flour for Pesach. Now you make a dough. At what point? So anyone knows how does it become chametz? Like
after 18 minutes of contact with water.
Right. After 18,
The orbit shows like certain signs also.
What?
Like even if it's under 18 minutes, isn't it? If like the matzah shows certain signs, like it bubbles.
Correct. If it shows certain signs that it starts to bubble or whatever, then yeah. But otherwise, up to 18 minutes, halachically, it will not become chametz. However, if it becomes warm, let's say if it's very warm there, that's why they do it in a cool place. But if the dough starts to become warm, it could become chametz earlier, potentially.
Why?
Why? That's just the way it is. The warmth will cause it to rise. So that's why the place where they roll the dough is far away from the oven, where the fire is. And it says halachas you're not supposed to knead it by the sun, and they make sure it's cold over there. It's cool. It's not cold, but it has to be a cooler place, so there's no warmth there. Now, there's another. So the matzah that we use for the seder has to be flour and water, and the reason is because the Torah says lechem oini. Lechem oini. Torah calls it lechem oini, poor bread. Lechem oini. Now we learn out that the matzah has to be only flour and water because it's poor bread. Poor meaning that there's no taste in it. It's very simple, just flour and water. Can't be anything else in the matzah other than flour and water. The matzah that we use for the seder. The matzah that we use throughout Pesach theoretically could have certain things in it, but very limited. But practically, you're not going to make two separate runs of matzah, one for the seder and one for other days of Pesach. There's only like certain things. It can't be spices. It could be. You could put in like certain there's different things that's brought down, like sesame seeds, for example. So theoretically, you could put sesame seeds into the dough for the matzah that you're not going to use for the seder. You make two separate runs. They could put sesame seeds to eat during the day, but for the seder, it must be only flour and water. The Torah calls it lechem oini, poor bread.
You can have sesame seed on Pesach.
Huh?
You can have sesame seed on Pesach.
Halachically, you can have sesame seeds. There's a lot of we're gonna get to customs, We're going to get to, I know you asked about it, we're going to talk about it. But talking about according to halacha, sesame seeds is not chametz. It's not kidneys. Actually, it could be okay. When we get to the kidneys, we'll clarify that if it's. Now, there's another type of matzah called matzah ashira. Matzah ashira. Matzah ashira means rich matzah. Matzah ashira, rich matzah. This refers to matzah that's flour and not water, but flour and apple juice, flour and eggs, anything other than water. It's called rich because it has a rich taste. It's called matzah ashira. Now, this matzah, according to halacha, there is no possibility of it becoming chametz at all. Because being that there's no water in it, is not able to become chametz. If that's the case, there should not be any issue with this type of matzah. If you make flour and juice, flour, and they sell it in the store, they sell matzah shir flour with apple juice, flour with eggs, and there's no water in it, it cannot become chametz. However, even though it cannot become chametz, we are prohibited to eat it on Pesach. Because our chachamim, our sages, prohibited us to eat this on Pesach because theoretically, oh, by the way, let me just clarify. I said sesame seeds. I said if I know something didn't sit with sesame seeds, we cannot eat because it's kidneys, it's legumes. But I'm reading just from the Alter is not discussing just before the prohibition of kidneys came into effect. He's saying that theoretically, sesame, right. So sesame seeds is in the category of kidneys. But we're going to get to it. When we discuss kidneys, we'll discuss it in detail. In any case, but there could be other things that theoretically you could put into the dough, but it's not practical and just make the same run for the entire Pesach. In any case, Chacham prohibited us to eat this matzah shira, this matzah that's flour with juice, and the reason is as follows: because in case water does fall into it, water does mix into this dough, then not only will it have the ability to become chametz, as we know flour and water could become chametz, but the ability to become chametz will go much, much faster. And it will go so fast that unless you're really quick, how you knead the dough very quickly and you bake it very quickly, it could become chametz. So the Chachamim were strict and they said, we're not going to allow you to have a dough that's flour and apple juice and any other juices other than water, even though there's no water. And it cannot become chametz, because in case some water gets into it, then it makes it even worse. It's even worse than just a regular dough of flour and water. Over here, the ability to become chametz is much stronger, it's much faster, and chances are it will become chametz unless you're really fast. So the Chachamim said, we're going to prohibit you to eat this. However, they do sell it in the stores because the Chachamim did not prohibit it for people who need it, like for children or older people, sick people. Or for them, it's important to have this matzah. It's easy for them to chew, or whatever the reason is. The Chachamim said we're not prohibiting it for everyone. It's not like chametz, but people who require it, there's a good reason why they want to have it. Then for them it's okay to have this matzah shira. Now, in the matzah, now just like we don't put any juice in the matzah, and yeah, so just like we don't put any juice into the matzah, also we're not supposed to put any salt. Why can't you put in any salt in the matzah? So there's two reasons. One reason is because the Torah calls the matzah lechem, poor bread. Poor bread means it should have nothing else in the matzah. But the other issue is that salt has the ability to bring warmth. Salt can give warmth to the dough, which means it can have the ability for it to rise. And also, some say that salt is similar to fruit juice, just like we don't mix fruit juice with water. Fruit juice and water has a very strong chance to rise very quickly. So too, if you're going to mix salt inside the matzah, that some opinions say that the ability for it to rise will go much faster. So that's why we're supposed to refrain from. That's why you're not allowed to put salt into the dough. Now, what about putting salt? Now, when we eat the matzah the night of the Seder, and salt is and matzah is called lechem leini, poor bread. So the question is, could you put salt on your matzah? So according to halacha, there is no issue putting salt on your matzah when you're eating it the night of the Seder, because the matzah itself is poor bread, so it's no problem. But our custom is that we do not put any salt on the matzah, because we want to have just the taste of the matzah. We don't want anything else but the taste of the matzah. So our custom is that when we eat the matzah at the night of the Seder, when we're doing the mitzvah, eating the matzah, the custom is we don't put any salt on it, even though according to halacha you are allowed to. Sometimes the matzah, you find matzah, to open up a box of matzah before Pesach, and that's the proper thing to do, to check the matzahs for Pesach, because sometimes there could be matzahs that are folded over, or it has a bubble on it. And if the matzah is folded over, there's a concern that it might be chametz. Probability is that it's not, but we are strict because we are concerned, being that it's folded over, that means the heat had to get into the whole thing. Maybe the heat didn't get into it because it's folded over, and it didn't bake properly, and then it became chametz. So in the bakery, they check through it. They make sure if there's any matzahs that are folded, they check everything. But sometimes they can overlook certain matzahs, and also it's a very small amount. They feel it's insignificant. So if you take out a matzah and you see that it's folded over, our custom is that we break it off. But we don't just break off that piece. We break off more than that, because if, let's say, that did become chametz, let's say it became chametz because it didn't bake properly. So now, does the whole matzah become chametz? Because it's heat. With this heat, it transfers. You have to be concerned that the heat of the matzah transferred the taste from the part of the matzah that became folded over. And let's say we're concerned that it become chametz. Now, does it make the whole matzah chametz? So it only makes like another inch. In other words, even if that part did become chametz that we're concerned about, it can't go more than an inch, because there's no liquid. There's no medium of liquid. It's all dry, so it's only going to go another inch. So when you're breaking off that piece of matzah that's folded over, you're going to break off another inch. Or some say it's about 3/4 of an inch, somewhere around that area, about an inch. You break off. Yeah.
Grape juice, and then it spills, you have the matzah.
The grape juice spills in the matzah?
Yeah,
That's not a problem. Grape juice spilling in the matzah does not create a problem. Oh, so let me clarify. We spoke about a flour, mixing flour with juice. That's when it's a flour. When it's flour. Once it's baked, it can't become chametz. We are strict that we don't want the matzah to become wet. We'll talk about it. That's kibrach. So we'll explain it. But that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing making a dough with juice. A dough with juice, you cannot, if it's juice with water, it's going to rise. That's for sure out of the question. And that's the reason why we explained, one of the reasons why we don't want to put salt into the matzah. So obviously salt is like juice. Now you have juice and water together. It's not good. Now, if you find on Pesach, the best thing is if you could check the box of matzahs before Pesach, check everything, but it's hard sometimes to go through all the matzahs. But if you find it on Pesach and you find a piece that's folded over, so the question is what to do. And some opinions say, now in general, we discuss what do you do when you find matzah on Pesach? Find matzah on Pesach is chametz, and it's muktzah. And you just leave it there, you just cover it. Well, there's a concern of chametz. So what do you do? So I've seen many opinions that right, and I'm still looking into it because I have my questions about it. They say that you put it away, you'll burn it after Pesach. Because on Pesach, chametz is muktzah. But I'm still looking into it because I have not clear. Theoretically, you could take a piece of the matzah. If you break up a piece of the matzah, and not the whole matzah is chametz, right? Only the part that's folded over. I mean, even then, it's just a concern of chametz. If you break it off together with another piece attached to it, not the whole thing is chametz, part of it is not. So you take that piece and you flush it down the toilet, and it's not the whole thing shouldn't become muktzah. But I've seen many people who write that put it away and burn it after Yom Tov. So I'm still looking into it. Okay. No. So now you mentioned gebrachs, right? So what's this idea? Anyone knows what's the reason why we have this custom that we don't want the matzah to become wet? What are we concerned about?
Probably that there's flour left over on the matzah.
Right. Just in case the dough was not kneaded properly and there's some flour left, and then when it touches water, potentially it can come chametz. So it's a concern that the dough is not kneaded properly, and there's some flour left somewhere that's not mixed properly, and now when the water touches the flour, it can become chametz. And that's the reason why we are strict. It's a stringency, not everyone keeps it, but many Chabad them are very strict with gebrachs. Yes.
But if there's no residual flour, can't it be that just like contact with the matzah is already like giving it exposure to water above 18 minutes?
I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying if there's no flour, what's the concern? And then you said about 18 minutes.
Yeah, like I always thought that it didn't have to do with the flour, like just because it's like.
Are you asking even though there's flour, but who cares? It takes 18 minutes anyways?
Yeah.
That's your question?
Yeah.
So eating it quickly, what's the issue? Well, good question.
They'll make it become.
It's a good question, but you have to understand we have a lot of stringencies when it comes to Pesach. By the way, even when we need a dough, it does say that even though it takes 18 minutes to rise, but it says the proper thing is when you're kneading a dough, you should work with the dough constantly. You shouldn't let go of working all the time, and then don't knead it like that. So chatchila, you're not supposed to leave it the way it is. So there is so that could be also. So you're not going to be chewing it the whole time. It could be, but it could be just a lot of things that were strict when it comes to Pesach. And what if you eat it? I guess there's a concern that I don't know. It's a good question. If you're chewing it and eating it quickly, and sometimes you have things, and if you're putting it into a bowl of soup and it's staying there, and potentially if it becomes chametz, it can make chametz other things too. You understand also in Pesach, Chacham are very strict. I don't think I discussed it here. But even if a drop of chametz falls into your food, it doesn't become nullified. To keep that in mind. Imagine you're cooking a massive pot of food, Pesach, and a drop of a tiny crumb of bread falls into the pot. It doesn't become nullified because it happened on Pesach. There's a lot of things in Pesach that so theoretically, if there's an issue with gebrachs and something happens to it, and then that mixes something else, you don't chew it completely. But it's a good question. Theoretically, it does take 18 minutes, but it's a chumrah, it's a stringency.
Is there a question you can find the answer to it?
I could try. I don't know if there is an answer, because there's a lot of, in general, we do find a lot of stringency, especially with tzaddikim. Tzaddikim had even stringencies above and beyond, and there's no way to explain it. It's just a stringency. So not necessarily will there be an explanation for this. I'll just give you an example. There's a story with a big tzaddik that he had in those days. Everyone, it wasn't like now. You want matzahs, you go to the matzah bakery, and now a lot of people bake on their own matzahs. They got flour and they baked on their own. So this person who's a big tzaddik, he had this bag of flour that was special flour, for baking the matzahs, that he's guarding and everything, and make sure everything's 100%. He had this bag of flour, and he put it into a bag, and he put that bag into another bag, many, many bags, make sure that, then he tied it very good, and then where should he put it? Put it on the floor, He tied it to the ceiling. And it's hanging on a rope, it's tied to the ceiling. And then, when he wanted to use it, so someone was okay, we're about to make it. So someone went, grabbed the scissor, and was about to cut the string. And he said, no, the scissor's chametz stick. Now, could you explain this? Cutting the scissor, the string, because it's tied, there's many, many bags, and this is the rope that it's tied to. And let's say it's chametz stick, so then what's going. So you see that there's an idea when it comes to chametz that there's a lot of stringencies that we don't understand. It's the only time of the year that stringencies that don't make sense are still accepted. It doesn't mean any single stringency that we make up, but there is this concept of stringencies when it comes to Pesach that is accepted even though we don't understand it. But maybe another class we could talk more about it. Okay. Okay, so we have more time now. So this we'll discuss kidneys, legumes. So what's this idea that we know we don't eat rice, millet, and all these things in Pesach? Anyone has any idea why we don't eat these things?
Like spam.
Because
I think they used to plant it next to them, so like the wind blow into the ground. Or like doing.
it's not the main
No, They
reason.
were stored, I think with rice and wheat, she lost them, with rice and wheat, they were stored together. Back then.
That would be a reason. So that's the reason why a lot of that's brought down. Let's say salt has to be checked properly. Back then, even now, a lot of people check salt, especially then. And different things that grew would be next to the place of the wheat, and a wheat kernel might fall into it. But this is different. The kidneys, Chacham decreed that you cannot eat kidneys on Pesach because it has a similarity to the 5 grains. They have a certain similarity. Take wheat kernel and take rice. They have a certain similarity. Because they have a similarity, Chacham said, we allow you to cook up a pot of rice. They say cook a pot of barley. What's the difference? They look very similar. So because of that, Chacham said it's prohibited to have kidneys on Pesach.
What's the reason that,
Sfardim never accepted this prohibition. The prohibition came from the Ashkenazim, the Ramah. They founded this Yosef, and the Yosef never accepted this, never ruled this out. So, so basically, what is kidneys? Kidneys is rice, millet, corn, kasher, buckwheat, beans, lentils, and sesame seeds. Yeah, sesame seeds also on the list. There's also kidneys. A lot of the things aren't exactly similar to grain, but a lot of them, for example, mustard, they prohibited mustard seeds because it grows inside a shoot. It grows inside something, and it grows similar to the way some legumes grow. So when they prohibited legumes, they also prohibited, for example, mustard seeds, because mustard seeds grow similar to legumes. Now, the prohibition, again, Chacham were flexible with it, and they said that if it's necessary for people who aren't well, people who are sick, for example, you have a lot of products, for example, baby formula for infants comes from kidneys, comes from legumes. So they need it. That's part of the diet. You need to have baby formula. So we could be lenient to them, and they're allowed to have this. Or people aren't well, and they need to have something that has kidneys in it. Sometimes there are different vitamins or medications that have kidneys, but if a person requires it for medical reasons, even not for medical reasons, but I don't mean even not for serious medical reasons, saying he's not well, it's part of this person's diet, he needs it for his well-being, then we are lenient and they can have kidneys.
Are these cookies like a separate class?
Yes, you should have separate kidney because for everyone else, the kidneys is not kosher. In other words, for us, kidneys is not kosher. For them, it's kosher. So if for us it's not kosher, you'd only use the same vessels, the same kelim, the same spoons and forks that you're using for kidneys and using for ourselves. And then you have a lot of, and then because of this, this makes kosher the Pesach products more complicated because a lot of the oils that is usually used corn oil, canola oil, it's things that are kidneys. So if there wouldn't be the issue of kidneys, kosher the Pesach products would be much easier. But now we have to eliminate what kind of oil they can use. Now that there's an oil called cottonseed oil. Cottonseed oil, according to many opinions, is not kidneys. Even it's called a seed, cottonseed. But according to many opinions, according to Rabbi Yaakov Landau, on the show, this was it's so many years ago, and he passed that cottonseed oil is not kidneys, and many companies, many cheshedim will use cottonseed oil for the kosher Pesach products. Regarding going back to the mitzvah of matzah, there is such a thing called machine matzahs, and there are religious Jews that use it, kosher Pesach, but we're very against machine matzahs, very against it. It said it should not be even used for children. They had serious concerns of chametz. So machine matzahs you want to stay away from. And the Rebbe also encouraged that if you have people acquaintances, any people you're friendly with, you have a relationship with, especially people are in a position, Rabbanim, Shluchim, that they should send them matzahs, kosher, shmura matzah, hand-baked shmura matzah, at least for the start, they should have hand-baked shmura matzah. Oh, at the end of last class, we spoke about Shabbos HaGodel. Shabbos before Pesach is called Shabbos HaGodel. Why is it called Shabbos HaGodel? Because a great miracle happened. What was a great miracle? Because, you remember what's a great miracle? What happened then? Yeah. What was a great miracle? Because that year, Pesach was the 50th day of Nisan, which became the first day of Pesach, was on Thursday. The 10th day of Nisan was which was on Shabbos, which was when they brought the sheep. Hashem told them to bring the sheep and tie it to the bed and to prepare it, to have it for the night of the 15th, for the 14th day, to shed the current Pesach. Then they're going to put the blood by the doorpost, and then that night Hashem is going to kill the firstborn Egyptian. So the Egyptians came to the Jews and they saw them taking the sheep and tying them to the bed, and asked them what is this all about. And they told them what's going to happen at the night of the 15th. Hashem is going to kill out the firstborn Egyptians. So the firstborn Egyptians became very nervous, and what they did was they went to Parnay and they made a petition that he should let the Jews out. He obviously he refused, and then there was a war with the army of Parnay with the firstborn Egyptians, and they were killing each other out. And this is considered a great miracle, and this is considered the beginning of the redemption of Mitzrayim. And that's why we say Avodah Mayinu, that we say on the night of the Seder, we say Avodah Mayinu after Mincha. So the Rebbe asks the question, why is this considered the beginning of the redemption? the beginning of the miracles, how when we left Mitzrayim. This did not have any effect. It didn't change anything how we left Mitzrayim. It's just that the Egyptians were killing each other. So we don't glorify when people are getting killed. There's nothing special about that. Never explains what was the purpose of the redemption of Mitzrayim, which ultimately leads us to the future redemption. That was the beginning. What's the purpose? Just to get out of Mitzrayim, to get out of Galus, but to remove the bad that's in Galus, to get rid of the evil. The pasuk says, I'm going to remove the spirit of impurity, be removed from the land. So this, that the Egyptians themselves were coming to pot and saying, we have to let the Jews out, and they started killing each other because they were very passionate about letting the Jews out, that's considered the beginning of the removing of the evil, because it wasn't just about us getting out of Mitzrayim, but removing the evil from Mitzrayim itself. So here you see how in Egypt itself is changing. The bad is being removed. They themselves are demanding from Panay that the Jews should get out to such a point that there was a civil war. Okay. It's not good.
Like taking the flour from all the kidney products, given like there was a concern that you like would mix up, let's say like corn flour with like regular flour.
Because you're saying the reason why we can't have corn flour because it might get mixed up with regular flour?
Why that's one of the main decree that we don't eat kidney because like we can make flours and kidney and then like you get mixed up with like if it's like a kidney flour or like a mixed flour.
I hear what you're saying. You have a good point. I believe it's included in what I'm saying. We're saying what we're saying here, because the legumes, let's say the rice, look similar to barley, so it can lead to confusion. So I guess you could say it's the same idea. We're concerned that the flour will get confused, and people say, "Oh, I can use rice flour, so I'll use also wheat flour, which is not necessarily for Pesach."
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And then
Can you get a new water bottle for Pesach?
halachically you don't. People are strict. There's many stringencies when it comes to Pesach. A lot of people are strict, but if it's cold water, you wash it out, not a problem.